My 26F father, 59M, is a slightly known musician in my home country. Due to his career, he missed out on most of my milestones while I was growing up. School plays, a few birthdays, and both my high school and college graduations are a few. Mostly events, he was informed of months in advance and canceled on me either weeks or days before. He always apologized for doing so but never really seemed to feel guilty. I remember we almost fought once because I didn't want to watch a video he had missed my high school graduation to film. It hurt me so much as a child that I stopped expecting him to show up. It still bothered me when I got older, but at that point, I understood that it was his job and I should be grateful he even had one. Now, I'm getting married in 2 months. My fiancée, 28M, and I have been planning this wedding for a year and a half. The date was decided, and invitations were sent months ago. Almost every guest has already RSVP'd. I've reminded my father of the date several times this past year, and he kept assuring me he had blocked the entire week of the wedding and would be there. A couple of days ago, my father called to inform me he'd had to schedule a concert for my wedding day. He apologized and said he'd make it up to me with a gift. I don't want a gift. I want my father to come to my wedding. So I told him that either he figured out a way to reschedule, which I know he could probably do if he tried, or I'd cut ties with him. What followed was one of the biggest fights we've ever had. He called me ungrateful, spoiled and selfish for giving him that kind of ultimatum and expecting him to change his work schedule for my benefit, which he has asked me to do on many occasions before. He yelled, and I held myself not to yell back. We're still fighting over this. Most of my family is on my side, though both my mom, divorced from my dad, and my fiancé have warned me not to make any moves I might regret. My sister, 20F, is on my father's side, which doesn't surprise me. I love my father, and I really don't want to stop talking to him, but I'm done with him, expecting to be able to miss out on my life with no consequences. That being said, I'd be lying if I said that I don't feel guilty. Just writing this all down made me feel like a huge brat. So, Ida? More info. We've had a rocky relationship for a little over a decade now. For various reasons, including his tendency to use how much money he'd spend on my sister and me against us. That's why I try not to ask him for anything. It's got nothing to do with why I'm threatening to cut contact, though. I couldn't care less about presents. Especially coming from my father, pretty much anything he gives me comes with strings attached. As he explained on the phone, he forgot about the wedding date while scheduling the concerts with his manager. His current girlfriend reminded him hours later. I knew he couldn't actually block the whole week. He'd promised the same thing before my high school graduation, but he could still avoid it. Before he canceled on me, he specifically said he wanted to walk me down the aisle. I didn't want him to. I hate the whole giving the bride away thing, but I'd agreed because I thought it would be important for him. Edit. I thought I'd clarify some things. My mom and my fiancé are 100% on my side. They told me to be careful because they know I don't really want to go no contact. Also, my mom has barely spoken to my father in almost 20 years, and my fiancé is with me because we love each other, not because of who my father is. My father is not a struggling artist. He's been in this line of work since before I was born. I wouldn't consider him rich, but he lives more than just comfortably. If I thought he couldn't afford to reschedule a concert, I wouldn't blame him for not being able to come to the wedding. This specific concert is in a smaller city. For these, he can usually reschedule until ticket sales are announced, which they haven't been yet. There is some bureaucracy involved, which is why I've never asked him to do so before, but it is doable. I do have other people who can walk me down the aisle. My stepdad, which would make my dad furious so that I might do it purely out of pettiness, and at least 2 of my best friends would be more than willing to. Also, I've tried acting indifferent before. It doesn't work. He interprets it as forgiveness. It's the reason why he still does this. Also, he isn't paying for any part of the wedding. He offered to, but I declined. I don't live with him anymore, and both my fiancé and I have good jobs. When I was younger, I told myself that once I didn't need his money anymore, I'd never ask for it again. And yes, he paid child support and provided for both me and my sister. Finally, about my sister, isn't the golden child. He missed many of her milestones as well. However, she keeps taking his side for 3 reasons. 1. She still lives with him. 2. She has been belittling me since she was in elementary school. And 3. This is probably my fault. I've been sheltering her from these things her entire life. The only reason why her father went to her high school graduation was because I berated him. As a teen, I took over her fights with him and played mediator whenever I had to. Basically, she never had many problems with him because of me. She doesn't know half of what I've done for her, and I don't really want her to. Update. Hey guys. A lot has happened, but I'll try to keep this short. I'll start off by saying that your comments on my first post were very eye-opening. Though some of the assumptions you made were wrong, I could see where they all came from, and most of what you said was so spot on it was painful to read. Someone said that my father doesn't see me as a person, but as an extension of himself. That one hurt the most, because it's the best definition of my relationship with my father I've ever seen. My father wasn't neglectful in the traditional sense. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old, and my mom had primary custody of me and my sister, but we still went to his place several times a week. My mother is a teacher and couldn't raise us on her salary alone, so he was our main financial supporter even after the divorce. Because of all of this, he seems to believe he is the best father ever. Whenever we fought, he always insisted I was wrong and ungrateful. Those same arguments were used whenever I demonstrated I was upset over him missing out on my milestones. In his head, for instance, I couldn't get angry if he missed my high school graduation or if he didn't pay attention to any of the projects I developed in college because he was the one paying for my education. I decided to stop complaining about this when I was younger, having realized I wouldn't be able to get him to see my side. This wedding incident felt like a turning point, though. Especially since he wasn't paying for anything this time. It made me accept that he doesn't care how much he contributed anymore but still believes I don't have the right to be upset. I now realize there's no winning this. If he doesn't come, I'll be devastated. If he does, I'll always remember I had to force my father to come to my wedding. At this point, I'm not even sure which is worse. So, a few days ago, I had a discussion with my father over the phone, in which I expressed all of the above and more. And as expected, he called me dramatic, accused me of alienating myself, and berated me for talking to him the way I did. I hung up on him. This is how our fights have gone since I was a teenager, and it never solves anything. We haven't spoken since. I sent him a long text, basically saying I didn't want to hear from him until he was ready to both give me a sincere apology and own up to the fact that the status of our relationship was his fault. This is all wishful thinking. I really don't think either is going to happen. I love my father, and I know he loves me to bits. But I can't do this anymore. He's been around my entire life and still barely knows me for who I am. It's his turn to make that effort. Right now, I'm trying to muster up excitement for my wedding. I lost most of it these past weeks. My fiancée, my mom and my friends are all trying to cheer me up, and it's starting to work. I'm definitely feeling a lot better than last week. I'm really grateful to have them in my life. So that's it for now. Thank you all for your support on my previous post. Final update. Hey guys. This will probably be my last update. First of all, I'm happy to announce that I finally got married to the love of my life almost 2 weeks ago. For the last 6 years, this man has been my rock, my best friend and my biggest supporter, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with him. I give him, my mom and my friends, especially my awesome Mo, full credit for helping me regain my excitement for my wedding. And it was amazing. Everyone had fun, the food was great, and no one got too drunk, a constant concern of mine. Some of my friends have that tendency. I went home knowing I'd spent my wedding day surrounded by people who loved me. But my father wasn't there. After thinking very carefully about the matter and talking about it with my paternal family, all of whom were taking my side, I realized I wasn't ready to go NC. Especially since I will have to see him at least once a year for the holidays. But I legitimately don't want to invest in our relationship anymore. So, for now, I'm going extremely LC. I will act civil, though probably cold, whenever I'm around him, but that's it. I'm not answering his calls or texts, he's no longer welcome at my place, and I'm no longer inviting him to anything, including my birthdays, work events and my future children's milestones. I'm leaving the door open in case he ever wants to try to make an effort to be better, therapy, apologies, and actually caring about my accomplishments, but I'm more than ready to close it. I ended up talking to him one more time, again through the phone, a couple of weeks after my last update. I told him all of the above. And when he yelled at me, I asked him to name a single project I'd worked on in college. I had told him about 4 and explained one of them in detail several times, none of which he'd remember the next day. He couldn't. I asked him to describe one of them at least loosely. He couldn't either. I kept asking him about multiple details about my life that I clearly remembered telling him about, always at least twice. Nada. He claimed I'd never told him about any of this stuff. I said that not only had I informed him of these things frequently, but we'd also had that exact conversation dozens of times before. And the outcome is always the same. He's a great father, and I'm ungrateful and dramatic. I told him I'll always love him and be grateful for the things he did for me, but I'm done. He only cares about me as his daughter and not a grown woman who exists outside of his life. He never actually cared about anything that wasn't about him. I'm done with him, thinking I'm not worth the same respect that I have bent over backward to give him my whole life. We haven't spoken since. My cousin told me her mom, his older sister, berated him on the phone a few days later. My mom has offered to do the same, but I declined. He's been trying to talk to my sister about it, but I told her to stay out of it. Things have been getting a bit better between me and her. I considered having my stepfather walk me down the aisle, but he remembered me saying I never wanted my dad to give me away in the first place, so he encouraged me to do things my way. I ended up walking alone to a string version of Metallica's Nothing Else Matters. About halfway through, my 3-year-old goddaughter came up to me and grabbed my hand, and we walked the rest of the way together. It was perfect. My father texted me during the wedding, probably to ask for pictures. I didn't reply. For now, I feel numb. There is very little about the situation that didn't break my heart, and I'm not exactly happy about the outcome. Most of the time, I'm too sad to think about the silver linings but too exhausted actually to feel sad. That being said, I'm also ecstatic. I never thought I'd be as happy about my wedding as I am. We also just got back from our honeymoon, so it's been easier to focus on the good times. Finally, some people have PM'd me asking who my father is or even speculating about it. Please don't. This is still my family. In spite of everything, he is still my father, and I love him. I came here for advice, not revenge or sabotage. I wouldn't have created a throwaway if I didn't want to be kept anonymous. That's all, folks. Thank you for all your kind words and advice. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Wife ruined our 5-year marriage by cheating on me with some random dude during the camping trip I planned. I, 38 male, decided to take my wife of 5 years camping for her 30th birthday. She was an outdoorsy extrovert and I was and am an introvert with a healthy combination of lazy and active tendencies. A month prior to our camping trip, my wife had started harping on me to get more active and thoughtful in our relationship. I was a little surprised when she said it because it sounded like she was getting bored of me. She did message a lot of people on a regular basis, and even made friends in public. I didn't understand how or why she did it. I wanted to live off the grid in a cabin in the woods, but I knew that wasn't her dream. She worked part-time on her laptop as a writer, usually going to a park or somewhere outdoors to work. Meanwhile, I was the breadwinner, raking in piles of cash with my hard labor and industrial installation career. At first she would always offer me a back rub when I got home. Sometimes even a full body massage. It was amazing. I felt like she really cared about me and how hard I worked. Eventually, though, she stopped offering and started asking more of me in my time off. I tried to tell her how I felt, but she wouldn't listen unless I was giving in to one of her requests. These requests didn't seem like much to her, but they were to me. Being an introvert, I did not want to go to the parties she was invited to. Somehow she was always invited on trips or to people's houses, and I never wanted to go. A trip with just us would have been fine, but to go to a stranger's house and sleep over seemed like a big uncomfortable thing to me. I hate chit-chat. So, to compromise, I told her about the birthday trip I planned for us. Just me and her spending 4 days on Assateague Island, camping in our fold-down RV. She was ecstatic. She loved horses and camping, but never imagined traveling there and making it happen. In the weeks leading up to this trip, she started giving me massages again. At the time I had no idea what my wife was capable of, and just how much she'd convinced herself there were other men out there for her to find. On the island, our campsite was no more than 70 yards away from another RV. It was bigger and fancier. Way more than I wanted or needed. Of course my wife was impressed. When the ponies came over to us, they didn't linger for long. They headed for the neighboring RV because they already had a campfire going. My wife used this as an excuse to go introduce herself. She asked me to go with her, but I didn't want to. I told her I didn't mind if she went over to chat, and told her I loved her. She was gone for an hour before I decided to go over there. As I approached, I noticed it was a single, attractive man that my wife was chatting away with. In my mind, I was wondering why he needed such an obnoxious RV if it was only him. She was laughing and blushing and it was clear to me she really liked this guy. Not only that, but she looked at me like she was disappointed when I finally decided to show up. She hesitated to introduce me as her husband, and that was the greatest slap in the face. I told her I wanted her to come back to the RV with me, and she asked why. I was so embarrassed she was challenging me. I just told her I had a surprise for her, because I knew it was the only way she'd come with me. Even then, she told App she'd be right back. When we got back to our site, the horses followed me. My wife was thrilled by that. The horses surrounded me as I firmly reminded her I was doing this all for her. She was my world and I wanted to show her I could be her husband without being an extrovert. I reminded her how well we loved each other over the past 5 years, and how I could continue being the man for her. Then I asked her why she even wanted to talk to this guy, or have so many friends, or go to parties. I asked what valuable fulfillment it gave her, in her heart, and why it made her feel good to smear on makeup, put on a dress, and go converse with people even if I wasn't there. She was surprised and a little offended, but when she tried to explain the pleasure she got from being an extrovert, she only sounded egotistical and shallow. She realized how she sounded and got frustrated with me, concluding that she was just going to make friends and talk to whoever she wanted, whether I approved or not. She tried to make it sound like I was controlling her, but I wasn't. I always let her do whatever it was she wanted even if it didn't make sense to me. Throughout our marriage, she never cheated on me or gave me any reason to believe I couldn't trust her. Although, I never did check her phone. I wasn't confrontational and never felt like I needed to see who she was talking to. I really didn't know just how heartless she could be. She put in her earbuds and sat with the horses on our site. I was relieved she didn't go back to App out of spite, so I started our own campfire, hoping it would make her happy. Eventually we went to bed in silence. My wife curled up alone on the far side of the bed. I was glad to get some sleep and a fresh start in the morning. I had no idea I was about to wake up much earlier than expected. It was still dark out when I turned over to spoon my wife, and she was gone. Instantly, I was thrown into a nightmare. I instantly pictured her with App, in his RV, but I spared a few seconds to check our bathroom. She wasn't there. I put on my robe and slippers, raced over to the RV, and listened. As soon as I heard the slightest noise from inside, I banged on the door. I heard my wife gasp, followed by some shuffling. As soon as App opened the door, I pushed my way in while yelling for her. She was breathless and frantic, adjusting her pajamas and walking out from the small bedroom. When I could see her face, she looked terrified. Just then, App shoved me really hard, straight out the door of his RV. I landed on my back, and it hurt bad, but I still got to my feet. This was when my wife absolutely broke down. She started crying harder than I ever saw in my life, and she was screaming at App for hurting me. I started walking back to our site, and she flocked to my side, trying to make herself useful by holding up my arm. I yanked away and told her I was a man, and I didn't need her to survive. She could barely speak, but she was saying sorry and stuttering to explain why she was in App's RV. She couldn't form a sentence, and she'd buy herself time by sobbing. She knew she was guilty, she just didn't want to say it. She wanted to lie and cover it up. I cut to the chase and told her I knew she slept with him. I knew she was willing to sleep with him and sneak off from me to defile our marriage. I told her we were over and I would be filing for divorce. As I said it, I knew I was making this decision quickly, but I also knew she did this to me, and it was reality now. I knew my logic was sound and I knew I would stand firm in my decision. My wife started hyperventilating, and it was hard to see her that way. I really wanted to make her feel better, because all she wanted was me, and I wanted her, but I knew I couldn't. We were stuck together, at least for the night, because I needed to sleep before driving us home. At this point she was willing to do anything to show me respect and humility, so she left me alone to sleep. She would have done anything for my forgiveness, which is such a shame because she should have considered how much I mattered to her before she decided to cheat on me with a camping stranger. On the car ride home, it was silent and awkward. I thought about how I had noticed the downfall in her behavior, but never imagined she'd do this. I had tried to talk to her about things before, but it never helped because she wasn't willing to change her perspective or let what I was saying sink in. When we got home, she refused to pack her stuff. She did not want to tell her father what happened. She didn't want anyone to know or get involved in our business. I had no choice but to call her dad. Her dad helped her pack her stuff, and it was like she was a child. It was disturbing. I trusted her father enough to leave them to it while I went for a drive. Out of all the people she talked to on her cell phone, I didn't know any of them personally. I didn't know which of her friends would actually come help her get her stuff, but in the end, the answer was no one. None of her friends were really friends. They were all superficial and absorbed in their own lives, except for one thing. They all thrived on the drama when they got wind of my wife's infidelity and divorce, in which she lost everything. That's when some of them messaged her to get the scoop and tell her she was right and totally justified in her actions, and some of them scolded her and called her what she really was. Some of them stopped talking to her completely, which included one of her closest friends. She was so heartbroken that she stopped writing and earning an income. I can only hope she learned her lesson. I hope she realizes that she was obsessed with the wrong things and convinced herself over time that she didn't need me, or deserve someone else. Well, she got her opportunity, except now she can't find someone else. As much as it hurt to let her go, accept what happened, and start over, I know I grew from this experience. She was only my first attempt at marriage, and won't be the last. I take what I can from those years in my life and let it fuel me to be better. More selfless, understanding, observant, and willing to love my partner in her love language.